I've been coming out to the shed each evening after work, which can be a bit of a struggle because as soon as the sun goes down it gets pretty cold, even with my little diesel heater running. But I've been trying to get this floor sorted out, and I ended up making it multiple times, and each time I found problems with it or ways I could make it better. So I ended up doing it quite a few times. This was out of steel, and I thought this was being rather tricky to bend. Turns out this is 1.2 mil steel, not 1. I found I do have 1 mil steel as well, 1 mil Zintec, that's this stuff. I've got lots of aluminium. One thing I discovered is some of the folds you have to make on this would be really awkward the way I was trying to make it. So trying to fold this edge down, this edge up, and this edge over on the brake is actually impossible because of the angles. So one of the folds you always had to do with a hammer and dolly, and you can get it nice doing that, but it's just easier if you can use the brake. So I ended up changing how I did it. I made the floor basically this shape, no flange on the top, and I remade it in aluminium. What I ended up doing is made it in multiple pieces. So this is that floor piece in aluminium. It's not actually bolted in, it's just sitting there at the moment. There will be bolts through here, and here, and at the bottom, so that'll hold that in place nicely. It just comes up. This piece here is just flat with a flange on this edge and a flange under here just to tidy that up. You can't see that because of the tension rod. And what I actually have, if you look from the other side, we might be able to see it. I've screwed everything in place, so it's a bit hard to see, but if you look down in there, I have a piece of metal strap that goes down and under that floor, and that's what provides the support for your heel for the clutch pedal. So this angle bracket goes down here and across. This is the bolt that's holding it in place, which also holds, I think it's the mounting for the reverse gear lever inside the gearbox. So this is the floor for your clutch foot. Because there's that metal strap there, it's nice and strong. These are little gutter bolts or stove bolts. This piece here, it's just held on with 2 screws. All this is for is to hide all of the mechanism and the moving parts and anything you could catch your trouser leg on. It makes the clutch pedal much easier to press. You just sort of slide your foot along the edge without having to worry about the mechanism that's behind there. It keeps it all out of the way and tidy. So the chassis will be drilled. A few more of these screws, these bolts will go through to hold this to here and to hold this one to here and to there. That does mean you have to put these panels in before you put in the front section of under tray. So the front piece of under tray will come from along here and up as high as I can go up here, but you end up having to start cutting pieces out of it for, say, the steering and the brake cables and the gearbox bell housing. But I'll bring it around and curve it up as much as I can. And that'll bolt also to this rail here. So from here forwards, it's just kind of bent. There's nothing supporting it down here. The firewall will come across and down, and there will be more of a flat floor here. That'll come down here to sort of close this off, if that makes sense. I think it's impossible to fully enclose it. What I'm worried about is there's always going to be little pockets where mud and dirt and stuff can get into. But I think you just kind of have to live with that, and you have to know to clean it out. So I haven't drilled the holes in the chassis yet. That'll be the next job. But yeah, I think that's come out reasonably neat and tidy. It's relatively easy to get all the pieces in place. That was the other problem. There was no way to do a floor in one piece that you could actually get in there because of the angles and because this piece of the floor actually goes inside the chassis rail to close off that space. So I think that's worked out pretty well. I have tried it with driving shoes on, and it works really well. You don't get caught up on the little screw heads or anything. It makes everything nice and enclosed. Passenger side is much easier because they don't need pedals, so it's just a flat floor. So I'm pleased with how that's come out. I need to start thinking about painting bits of the frame so I can start screwing some of these brackets to it. But the hinges, these are the bolts I'm using. Interestingly, gutter bolts, and I got the ones with the slotted heads, which are getting a bit tricky to find. Most of them have what's called a combination head with a cross head, which is kind of not really period. But the interesting thing about these gutter bolts is they're still actually a real Whitworth thread. So these are 3/16 actual Whitworth, not BSF. I think it's one of the few modern uses of the Whitworth thread still. I think the other one is camera tripod mounts, which I think are still 1/4 inch. Not sure. But it meant I actually got to use my Whitworth taps, not my BSF ones for once. I very rarely get to use them. These are also what I'm going to use to bolt the under tray on, because they're nice shallow bolts, and it's all removable if you ever need to take it apart in the future. Instead of riveting everything on, this can all be unbolted. So those are the bolts. I've got way more of those. You can still get those in New Zealand. My other bolts, this is my package that arrived today off my nuts and bolts from the UK. 350 New Zealand dollars worth, including the shipping. So there's a lot of stuff in there that I need. These are like countersunk screws for the hinges, all sorts of things. Now that I've got those, one thing I want to do, if I've got time before I go in, is I can actually bolt on my proper headlamp brackets now. The reason I haven't is because I haven't had bolts long enough to do it. So those are the bolts. Now the hinges, these were the ones I got originally from the UK in brass. They're too short. These are ones I found in Australia, and I bought 4 of them, but they only supplied 2 of them because they only had 2 in stock. That was months and months and months ago. Eventually I sort of said, well, what's happening? They said, well, we'll send you what we've got. So they did that. And the others have been on back order. And the last I heard was they would be coming in October. So the guy sort of said to me, or I can refund you for those. So I've gone for the refund. I've had to find other hinges which are coming from the UK, but oddly enough I found them on TradeMe, which is our local auction site. So I've got 4 more hinges, cast steel ones like these without the grease nipple in them, coming from the UK. So hopefully they shouldn't take too long to get here, and I can actually get the doors mounted and start looking at some of that. But yeah, I think that's where we're at. I'm still looking at the seat belts. I'm going to get in touch with the actual low volume certification people. They've got a technical board panel thing who are there to help with questions like this. I think probably the best course of action for me is talk to them, send them pictures of what I'm doing, and find out if what I want to do is acceptable, because there's no other way to do it. I can't bolt them anywhere else. And I think if I can get it in writing from them that that's fine, then it'll be fine for the certification. It'll give my certifier guy the authority he needs to say, yep, that's good. So I'm going to try that. The other thing is, in the last film, I mentioned about the seats needing really thin padding, and someone mentioned having webbing in the bottom of the seats. That's an excellent idea, and funnily enough, the Wolseley Hornet Special that I showed in the last film that I saw up in Auckland has exactly that. So what you do is you cut a circle, or cut a hole, doesn't have to be a circle, out of the seat, and you have like upholstery webbing underneath it, and it gives you a little bit more padding, a bit more space, a bit more springiness, I guess. I guess at the expense of storage space underneath there, but you know, I'd rather have decent seats than too much storage. So that's kind of how it's looking. Yeah, I think that's tidied all of that up nicely. It's still going to be interesting to see how the under tray and the firewall all comes together. You know, that will be quite an interesting problem. I'm going to need to get more cardboard, I think, so I can mock up a lot of that. And I did just realize if I can actually create another storage space in the front here, because if the firewall comes down to here and the under tray comes up, there's no steering on this side to get in the way, and the floor is flush with this up to here, I've actually got that much storage here. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll make that a nice little storage space. So I'll just have a removable cover there, and that should work quite nicely. One thing I didn't mention it, is when I was up at Motat, I was looking in the shop, as you do, and I found this, which I thought was quite neat. It's just a little pack of replicas. So it's got little replica cigarette cards, a policeman, some old school type books and things. I think this says what's on the back. What's in there? So I don't know, just some nice period that's not period tat to put in the car. So if I had a glove box, that's where I'd put it, but there isn't one on the Brooklands. So yeah, there's my floor. The other thing is I wanted to make sure these panels, you can get to them when the body's there. If you take the body off the car, they all stay in place. But if the body is on the car, you can still get access to everything through the door here. It's easy at the moment because there's nothing in the way, there's no skin here. But that's one of the things you have to consider is, well, when it does have a skin, how do you get to everything? But yeah, that's come out really well. Okay, it's Sunday now. I had quite an early night last night after my road trip. It's quite tiring actually, driving all that way and then all the way back. New Zealand roads can be tricky, and there's lots of really bad drivers around. So one thing I noticed on my trip is my fuel economy seemed way better on the way back than the way up there. A friend of mine did say, well, it is downhill all the way, which is kind of correct. But I'm wondering if it's just because I was able to give the car a bit of an Italian tune-up, let's say, on a couple of the passing lanes. So in New Zealand, one of the common complaints is you'll get stuck behind somebody because the roads are all mostly one lane, one direction. So if there's somebody slow in front of you, you get stuck behind them. And people aren't so good at pulling over. And one of the biggest complaints is you'll get somebody who will be doing 80 kilometers an hour on 100k roads until they get to the passing lane, at which point they'll speed up to 110 because it's a nice long straight road. And that happened to me, stuck behind a camper van, surfboards on the top, bikes on the back, doing 80, 90 most of the way till they hit the passing lane. And just as I was going past them, they decided to speed up to 110. So I floored it. Turns out a 3.9 litre V8 in a Land Rover actually goes reasonably well when you really stick your foot down. And I think I got up to about 130, overtaking them. But maybe it's what the engine needed. It needed a good blast and a good freeing up. I've been running injector cleaner through it, so that's helped as well. I've cleaned everything, of course. I replaced the faulty vacuum advance on the distributor, all those kind of things. All these little changes have definitely been making an improvement to it. But the other thing I need to do is, if it's not raining at the moment, it's looking pretty likely to, but I really need to bolt the seats back into it. Let's see. So the bike, obviously I did another film on that. I'm not going to be doing much on this to start with. I need to do a lot more research to understand what should be here and what shouldn't, and what's been modified and what I need to fix to bring it back to effectively original spec. There's lots of good pictures online. Last night I joined the UK Velo Club, and that should give me access to spares, and I'm hoping information and books and bits and pieces, so I can figure out exactly how to restore this thing. It's the wrong colour for a start, and somebody's messed around with it. It's mostly all there. There are some bits missing, so it's going to be a fun restoration. I'm really looking forward to doing the engine, because I was right, it is less than 200cc. I think it's officially 196cc, and as I mentioned, it's a flat twin 4-stroke, obviously, with water cooling, so it's got a radiator, and the hand change gear lever, and the sort of bevel shaft drive to the back. So mechanically it's going to be really fun, and unlike the K2250 there, where the engine was good, I didn't really need to do anything to it, so I didn't bother opening it up. Save that for another day. This one, I think I will completely strip it down, see what needs replacing, rebuilding, and completely rebuild it. I think it's worth doing that, especially if I'm trying to bring it back to original condition. It is going to be interesting trying to get this flat. It's all dinged up here, but I think this is double skinned. So yeah, you can see in there, there's 2 layers of metal there, so I'm not sure how I can get behind it to sort of panel beat it out. Interesting. I guess more will be revealed when I eventually pull it apart. So back onto the Riley. One thing I got during the week was this pretty neat inspection lamp. Came up on the local auction site. Nobody else bid, but I did actually screw up my bid and ended up paying a little bit more than I was hoping to. About $7 more. It wasn't a huge amount more, but I messed up my bidding. So I didn't get it quite as cheaply as I could have, but I still got a bargain. It's a Lucas Model 100 inspection lamp. I think this may be slightly out of period. I think these are more 40s, 50s possibly. But it has a little hook on the end that retracts, and the cool thing is it has the cable on it, and it's kind of like a drum mechanism. So you unspool the cable like that, and then you turn the end of it that rotates to spool the cable back in. Very neat. I'm not going to restore it. I think it looks fine just how it is. It's got some of its original gold paint. The rest of it is in nice, honest, used condition, so there's no point trying to restore it. I'd rather keep it as it is. One thing I will do though is replace the crocodile clips. I believe these originally had similar to banana plugs on them, because these 2 holes I think are where those are meant to plug in. So when it's all wound up, I think you're supposed to tuck the ends of the connectors into those holes. So I'm going to fit more modern banana plugs on it. This is a fairly retro looking modern banana plug, 4mm. Doesn't fit in the holes, unfortunately, but it will fit in the inspection lamp ports on my Rotax panel, my made up Rotax panel. I used modern banana plugs there as well, so it makes sense for me to get another one of these. I've been through everything, all my parts bins, and I cannot find another one of these. I'll have to order some, but I'm going to put those on the end. Even the gold plating on the connector goes with the bronze, and that will actually be useful in the Riley, because this will be a voltage source to run the lamp, and the lamp even works. So thought that was a pretty cool little find. As to the rest of the Riley, I did ring the LVVTA to ask them about the seatbelt mountings, and they said to email their tech email with a diagram. So I actually ended up preparing a whole little little PDF for them explaining why I can't fit it to the car as it is standard, and I did some drawings for my proposed solution, which as far as I can tell meets all the requirements of the manual. That's what I want them to confirm. So the manual shows you how you measure what they call the H point, based on the seat squab and the seat back, and from that you can figure out where the lower mountings for the seat belt needs to be. I'm guessing it's all to do with where your hips are and how the belt has to hold you in. So I was hoping to use the rear cross member. That won't work because it's not wide enough. You cannot get the mounts bolted to that going far enough out. The other problem is then the bolts would go through the under tray and be sticking out the bottom of the car. I wasn't too happy with that. So my solution, after I started drawing this up, it became quite obvious how to do it, is this was the original seat back mount I was going to use, and this is based on an original. This is how it's done in some of the original cars. It's actually timber supports at the back here on the front of the cross member that holds the back of the seat base. So I realized if I replace that with a piece of angle that goes across the whole of the car, I can bolt that securely to the chassis, so that's not going to go anywhere. It provides the lip for the back of the seat, and I can weld on the bosses for the seatbelt attachment points. So one will go there, which clears all of the torque tube and brake cables, and the other one can actually go right inside there, inside the chassis rail effectively, but it clears everything. So the belt comes up here, and that gets me within the width tolerances that the manual specifies. You have to have the mounts a certain place back and a certain width apart. There's a range that it has to go within, and I think that should work. So I've drawn all of that up for them, explained why and how it has to be done that way, explain the car and what it is. So hopefully when that comes back, I can machine up the mounting bosses for that, weld them in place, make all of that so it bolts in. I'll have to make slightly longer seat bases because now they need to be half an inch longer. I was thinking of making them longer anyway, because what I will do on the front edge of the base of the seat is I'll glue on a piece of wood with a slot machined in it that fits over that front support. That stops the seat sliding. Should be nice and secure. So yes, hopefully what I want them to do is confirm that in writing, and then my certifier has said any questions like that, get them to okay it, and then he's happy with it. So that's what I'm trying to do. My floor, I think I mentioned that before, that's come out quite nicely, really neatly. And the under tray, when I get to that, should all work the way it sort of comes up, and I should be able to box all of this in quite nicely. So it's kind of where I'm at with the Riley. I haven't made any holes in the instrument panel yet, but maybe I should do that. It would be nice to actually get some instruments mounted now I know pretty much where they're going to go. And I think all of them should be relatively easy to see and refer to when you're driving. The other thing is, especially at the back here, I think I've got all the brackets I need in place. The only other thing I may need to do is some brackets here or something here. It may just be a steel plate screwed to the inside of the frame, so that when the boot lid goes on, there's something for the locks to latch onto. So they'll go in there, I think. But if all of that works, I should be able to treat and stain the frame, and I can bolt a lot of these things on properly, so that that's all getting ready for skidding, basically. So that's where we're at. So a fairly quiet week, or weekend rather, in terms of the Riley. Like I say, I think I need to wait and see what the certifier people say about my seatbelt solution. If that's good, I can start going ahead and doing the rest. That may also mean I need to change slightly the shape of the seat base squabs, just have a little bit of a relief where the seat belts actually go, but that shouldn't be too hard to do. Oh, and I finally got to bolt on my proper headlamp brackets, which was good. So I'm quite pleased with those.